I was lying in bed at 3 in the morning, scrolling through my phone, watching my subscriber count climb higher and higher. I had just crossed $100,000 in a single month. $100,000 for taking pictures and videos of my body and posting them on the internet for strangers to consume. My notifications were exploding with new subscribers, new messages, new payments, new requests. Men from all over the world, from countries I had never even heard of, were paying their hard-earned money just to look at me, just to message me, just to feel like they had some piece of me that belonged to them, and I should have felt on top of the world. I should have felt powerful and successful and liberated and free. That is what everyone told me I should feel. That is what I told myself I felt. But instead, I was lying there in the dark, completely and utterly alone, and I felt like I was already dead, like my soul had quietly left my body a long time ago, and what remained was just a shell going through the motions, just a performance, just content. And that night, in that suffocating darkness of my expensive bedroom in my expensive apartment, Jesus showed up in a way I never expected and never could have predicted. He did not condemn me. He did not shame me. He did not list my sins or remind me of everything I had done. He simply asked me one question that shattered everything I thought I knew about myself, about my worth, about what I was really selling. But before I tell you what he said to me that night, I need to take you back to the very beginning so you can understand how I ended up there in the first place. I grew up in church, not just any church, but a very strict conservative evangelical church where modesty was preached from the pulpit every single Sunday without fail. I wore long skirts that went past my knees and high necklines that covered my collarbones. Pants were not allowed for women. Makeup was heavily discouraged. I was taught from the earliest age that my body was inherently dangerous, that it was something shameful that needed to be hidden and controlled and suppressed because it could cause men to stumble into sin. If a boy had impure thoughts about me, that was somehow my fault for not covering myself properly. I was taught that my sexuality was dirty, that even thinking about it or being curious about it made me disgusting in God's eyes, and I internalized every single word of it. By the time I was a teenager, I had a deeply complicated and painful relationship with my own body. I saw it as the enemy. I saw it as something that needed to be apologized for and hidden away. I was at war with myself before I even understood what the battle was about. My parents were good people in many ways, at least by the standards of our church community. They provided for me materially. They took me to church 3 times a week. They homeschooled me to protect me from the influences of the secular world. But they were emotionally distant in ways that left deep wounds I would not understand until much later. My father was a deacon in our church who cared deeply about his reputation and standing in the congregation. He cared about what other people thought of our family. He cared about maintaining the appearance of righteousness, but he rarely, if ever, connected with me as his daughter on an emotional level. I cannot remember a single time my father told me I was beautiful. I cannot remember him telling me I was smart or talented or that he was proud of anything I accomplished. The only time he really seemed to notice me, the only time he had plenty of words and strong opinions was when I did something wrong. When my skirt was an inch too short, when my shirt was slightly too fitted, when I laughed too loudly around boys at a church event. Then suddenly he had a lot to say. Then suddenly I had his full attention, but never for anything good, never for anything affirming. I learned early that the only way to get my father's attention was to mess up. My mother was submissive to my father in a way that felt suffocating and heartbreaking to watch as a young girl. She had no voice in our home. Her opinions did not matter if they differed from his. She existed to serve him and support him and agree with him. And I grew up with a deep terror in my heart of becoming her, of disappearing into a marriage the way she had, of losing myself completely to a man the way she seemed to have lost herself. I told myself I would never be that weak. I would never be that invisible. I would make sure I was seen. When I finally left for college at 18 years old, I was absolutely desperate to escape everything I had known. I wanted to shed my old identity like a snake sheds its skin. I wanted to be anyone other than the repressed, modest, silent church girl I had been forced to be for 18 years. I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to rebel against everything. I wanted to finally figure out who I actually was underneath all the rules and all the shame and all the fear they had piled on top of me. And like so so many sheltered kids who suddenly find themselves with complete freedom for the first time in their lives, I went way too far in the opposite direction. I started partying within my first week on campus. I started drinking heavily shortly after that, getting drunk for the first time, and loving how it silenced the constant anxious voice in my head. I started hooking up with guys because I was starving for the attention and validation I had never received from my father. Every time a man looked at me with desire, every time I caught a guy staring at my body, something inside of me lit up like a Christmas tree. It felt like power. It felt like worth. It felt like finally, someone was noticing me. Finally, someone was affirming that I existed and mattered. For those few moments when a guy wanted me, I felt like I was valuable, like I was significant, like I was seen. Of course, the feeling never lasted beyond those few moments. The morning after always came with crushing shame and emptiness, and the quiet, condemning voice in the back of my head, reminding me that I was exactly what my church had warned me I would become if I was not extremely careful. I was living proof that they were right to keep me locked up and covered up all those years. I was becoming everything they had feared, but I could not stop. The validation was too addictive. The attention was too intoxicating. Even though each hookup left me feeling worse than before, I kept going back because at least for those few moments, I did not feel invisible. By my junior year of college, I was broke and barely surviving. My parents had completely cut me off financially when they discovered what my lifestyle had become. A girl from our home church had seen pictures of me at a party on social media and told her parents, who told my parents, and that was the end of their financial support. No more tuition help, no more money for rent or food or anything else. I was on my own. I was working 2 exhausting part-time jobs, one at a coffee shop and one at a retail store, and I still could barely afford rent on my tiny shared apartment. I was exhausted all the time. I was stressed beyond belief. I was honestly sliding into a pretty serious depression. I felt trapped and hopeless and saw no way out. That is when a friend of mine named Alexis told me about OnlyFans. She had been on the platform for about 6 months at that point and was making more money than she had ever made in her entire life. Way more than either of her parents made at their regular jobs. She showed me her phone one night, showed me her earnings dashboard, and my jaw literally dropped to the floor. Thousands upon thousands of dollars a month, just for posting pictures and videos of herself. No boss, no schedule, complete control over her own content. She made the whole thing sound so easy and harmless and even noble in a way. She said she was finally in control of her own body for the first time ever. She said she was the one profiting from male desire instead of being exploited and used by it like we had always been. She said it was empowering. She said it was liberating. She said it was the smartest decision she had ever made. I was deeply hesitant at first. Even though I had walked away from the church and everything it represented, some part of me still felt the weight of everything I had been taught since childhood. Some part of me knew that this was crossing a line I could not uncross, but the bills were piling up on my counter. The stress was crushing my chest every time I tried to fall asleep. And honestly, I was already giving my body away for free to random guys at parties who did not care about me at all and never called me again. At least this way I would actually get paid for it. At least this way my body would be worth something concrete and measurable. That is how I justified it in my broken and desperate mind. Alexis helped me set up my account. She took my first photos for me, taught me about lighting and angles and what subscribers actually wanted to see. She helped me write my bio and set my subscription price. And within hours of my account going live, men started subscribing. Within a week, I had dozens of paying subscribers. Within a month, I was making more money than both of my part-time jobs combined. Within 6 months, I had quit both jobs entirely and was doing OnlyFans full-time as my only source of income. The money was absolutely unreal. I went from barely being able to afford instant ramen and store brand cereal to buying designer clothes and handbags without even checking the price tags. I moved out of my cramped shared apartment and into a beautiful luxury apartment all by myself. I bought a brand new car, the nicest thing I had ever owned. I took vacations to places I had only seen in magazines. I had complete financial freedom for the first time in my 21 years of existence. No one could tell me what to do. No one could control me. I was my own boss. I was successful. And I convinced myself completely that I was happy. I told myself this was the ultimate expression of female empowerment. I told myself I was taking control of my narrative, reclaiming my body from the shame the church had wrapped around it for so many years. I told myself that all those men paying monthly subscriptions to see me naked were the ones being exploited and used, not me. I was smart, I was savvy, I was strategic, I was winning a game that most women did not even know was being played. That is the story I told myself every single day. But the truth has a way of surfacing eventually, no matter how deep you try to bury it underneath justifications and rationalizations and carefully constructed narratives. The thing absolutely nobody tells you about selling your body online is what it does to your mind and your soul and your sense of self over time. At first, it feels exciting and thrilling and even fun in a strange way. The attention is intoxicating, the money is incredible, the sense of power is seductive. But slowly, so gradually that you do not even notice it happening, something vital starts to wither and die inside of you. You start to see yourself exclusively the way your subscribers see you, not as a whole complex person with thoughts and feelings and dreams and fears and hopes, just as a body, just as content, just as something to be consumed and discarded when a newer model comes along. I started to dissociate heavily during my content creation sessions. I would mentally leave my body while I was filming videos or taking photos, floating somewhere above myself and watching like it was happening to someone else entirely. It was the only way I could get through it. I would look at the images and videos afterwards and genuinely not recognize the woman on my screen. Who was she? What was she doing? Why was she degrading herself like that? I did not know anymore. The girl in those pictures felt like a stranger, a character I was playing, a mask I wore. The messages from subscribers started affecting me in ways I never anticipated. The things they would say to me, the demands they would make, the way they talked about my body like it was a product they had purchased and therefore owned and could do whatever they wanted with. Some of them were casually cruel, some of them were explicitly degrading, some of them made requests that made me physically ill to read, and I had to keep smiling through all of it. I had to keep performing enthusiasm and gratitude. I had to keep pretending I loved every second of the attention because that is what kept them paying. That is what kept the money flowing. One bad response, one moment of authentic disgust, and they would unsubscribe and move on to someone else who would pretend better. My relationships outside the platform slowly crumbled one by one. I found it impossible to date like a normal person anymore. Every guy I met in the real world either just wanted to use me because of what I did for a living, or was completely disgusted and wanted nothing to do with me once they found out. There was no middle ground. I lost close friends who could not understand my choices and did not want to be associated with someone in my line of work. I became increasingly isolated, spending most of my days and nights alone in my beautiful apartment, performing intimacy and connection for thousands of strangers on the internet who would never actually know me, who did not want to know me, who just wanted the fantasy. The money kept pouring in. 6 figures a year became 6 figures in 6 months. My subscriber count kept climbing. I kept raising my prices and people kept paying. I hit top percentages on the platform. I was considered successful by every possible external metric. And then came that night I mentioned at the very beginning when I crossed $100,000 in a single month. But internally, behind the carefully curated image, I was completely and utterly falling apart at the seams. I started drinking heavily every night to numb the growing emptiness that nothing seemed to touch. I started taking prescription pills to fall asleep because my mind would not stop racing with anxiety and shame and self-loathing the moment I laid down. I started having severe panic attacks that would hit me without warning and leave me curled up on my bathroom floor, gasping for air, unable to think clearly, unable to do anything except wait helplessly for them to pass. I was making more money than I had ever imagined possible in my wildest dreams, and I was more deeply miserable and empty than I had ever been in my entire 23 years of existence. I remember one night after a particularly degrading custom video session with a high-paying subscriber who had requested things I never in my life thought I would agree to do, I stood in my expensive rainfall shower for over an hour. The water had long since gone ice cold, but I could not make myself move. I just stood there, scrubbing my skin until it was raw and red, trying desperately to wash something off of me that would not come off no matter how hard I scrubbed. Trying to feel clean when I had never felt more dirty and used and empty in my entire life. And finally, standing there shivering in that freezing water, I admitted out loud what I had been desperately running from for years. This is killing me. This is literally killing me from the inside out, and I have no idea how to stop. That realization came about 2 weeks before the night that changed absolutely everything. The night Jesus confronted me in my bedroom. I was lying in bed in the darkness, mindlessly scrolling through my phone like I did every single night, watching my subscriber count and earnings climb, feeling absolutely nothing inside. Just numb, just empty, just dead. And then something unexplainable happened. I felt a presence enter my room. It was not frightening exactly, but it was heavy, weighty, thick. Like the very air around me had become dense with something I could not see but could absolutely feel pressing against my skin. I put my phone down slowly and sat up in bed, looking around my dark bedroom, trying to figure out what was happening to me. And then I heard a voice. Not audible exactly, not coming through my ears like normal sound, but clearer and more real than any thought I had ever had in my life. It bypassed my physical senses entirely and spoke directly into the very center of my being, into some deep place I did not even know existed inside of me. The voice said my name, my real full name, not my stage name, not my OnlyFans persona, my actual given name that I had not used or heard in years. And then the voice asked me a single question. It said, "Is this what you think you are worth?" I cannot adequately explain to you what happened inside my body when I heard those 8 words. It was like every single wall I had carefully constructed came crashing down simultaneously. Every lie I had been telling myself, every justification I had rehearsed, every defense mechanism I had built, it all just crumbled into dust in an instant. And suddenly I was not a successful entrepreneur. I was not an empowered, liberated woman. I was not winning any game. I was just a broken little girl who had never felt loved or valued or seen by her father, desperately selling herself piece by piece to strangers on the internet because she genuinely did not know that she was worth anything more than that. I started sobbing, not just crying, but deep gut-wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal inside of me that I did not even know existed. Years of accumulated pain came flooding out. Years of emptiness, years of pretending I was fine while I was dying inside. Years of performing happiness and empowerment while feeling nothing but shame and self-hatred. It all came pouring out of me in violent waves in that dark bedroom, and the presence did not leave. It stayed right there with me. It felt like arms wrapped around me even though I knew no one was physically there. It felt like warmth flooding into frozen places inside my heart that had been cold and dead for so long I had forgotten they could feel anything at all. And I heard the voice speak again, gentler this time, tender even. It said, "You were never meant to be consumed. You were meant to be loved, real love, not the counterfeit version you have been desperately settling for. You are my daughter, and I see you, the real you, not what you do for money, not what you show them on a screen. You, and you are precious beyond measure to me." I cannot begin to describe what those words did inside of me. My entire life I had been starving and searching for someone to truly see me, really see me, not my body, not my performance, not my carefully constructed image, me, the real me underneath all of it. And here was God, the very God I had been running from for years, the God I blamed for all the shame the church had heaped on me, and he was not condemning me at all. He was not making a list of my sins. He was not telling me how disgusted he was with my choices. He was simply telling me I was loved, that I was seen, that I was his daughter, that I was precious. I wept for hours that night. I did not sleep at all. Something was happening deep inside of me that I did not have adequate words to describe. It felt like parts of me that had been dead for years were coming back to life. It felt like chains I did not even know I was wearing were falling off my wrists and ankles. By the time the sun finally came up, I knew with absolute certainty that everything about my life was about to change. I found a church that was different from the one I grew up in, a church that talked about grace and relationship and love instead of just rules and shame and fear, a church where broken people like me were genuinely welcomed and embraced without judgment. I sat in the back row for weeks, just listening, just crying through every service, just letting God continue the work he had started in my bedroom that night. One Sunday, the pastor preached about the woman at the well, the woman who had been with 5 husbands and was currently living with a man who was not her husband, the woman who went to draw water at noon because she was too ashamed to go when the other women were there in the morning. And Jesus went completely out of his way to meet her there. He did not shame her. He did not condemn her. He offered her living water that would satisfy her forever so she would never thirst again. I realized that was me. I was the woman at the well. I'd been going from man to man, subscriber to subscriber, seeking validation and worth and love, and none of it ever satisfied. None of it ever lasted. I was always thirsty again, always needing more, always empty. But Jesus was offering me something completely different, something real, something that would actually satisfy the deepest longings of my heart. I gave my life to Christ that day. Real surrender, real relationship. I deleted my OnlyFans account that same week. Thousands of subscribers, hundreds of thousands in potential future earnings, years of content. I deleted it all. And what I felt was not regret or panic. It was peace. Because for the first time in years, I was not for sale. It has been 3 years now. I work a normal job. I am engaged to a man who knows everything about my past and loves me anyway. A man who saw me before he ever saw my body. I speak openly now about my story because I know there are other women trapped in that same darkness, believing the same lies I believed, desperately needing to know there is another way. Jesus confronted me with love, and it saved my life.